Welcome to Power Up, the podcast that uncovers the unique challenges women leaders face today. Join your hosts, Nat and Kristen, as we dive into the tough topics and provide actionable insights you can apply right now. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you don't miss any episodes.
This week we've been looking into yet another part of the history of work, and one of the things that we've realised is how much of it stems, which we probably should have already known, from war, from military. We thought we'd pluck out one of those terms, which is subordinate. It is the idea of being a worker bee or a individual contributor or someone who's part of a team is a subordinate. And in the military, that means you take instructions and you deliver on them.
Yeah.
Whereas in the world of work, especially the modern world of work, that is no longer what we want meant to be doing.
You're still meant to be a subordinate in a military, aren't you?
I presume so. My understanding is that military has probably changed as much as everything else over the last few decades. But yeah, I think when you are in those, probably the same as police and first responders.
It would feel like everything would fall apart if that wasn't the case in a crisis.
Yeah.
Because that you often adapt those command and control roles in a crisis. I totally understand that. And most people actually appreciate that because not everybody wants to be in the command. They just want to be told what to do in a crisis. And so I get that. But yeah, today we were chatting about how it's not relevant in the workplace. And it is episode 88, which has got a nice ring to it.
Oh, lovely. It's infinity.
Yeah.
And yes, and that idea, like you said, came about from in a crisis, we all respond. We've talked a lot about our lizard brains and the role of fight or flight or freeze. So the reason why in military and first responders do have that kind of structure is to avoid that. You don't think, you don't use your intuition, you don't respond by gut. You are so well trained that you just deliver what you need to deliver. But we operate in a knowledge economy. And in a knowledge economy, we actually need to use our brains. They're the most valuable part, not our ability to follow orders.
But probably starting a new role or just starting out in your career, it's absolutely appropriate to be an implementer. And quite often you might be hired to do just that. But there's a really interesting progression that happens in your career where you do have to transition from being not just executing others' ideas.
And I actually wonder if that's the case from day one because you're so close to what's happening. Like if you're on the front line, another military term, you actually have much more direct insights than anyone else. But you're right, as you progress, you tend to find you spot trends or you might have built up some knowledge. So when do you think that switched for you? When you started to go, ooh, actually I'm more than just implementation?
Hindsight 2020, and I always look back and think, ooh, I should have done that earlier, which is why I wish I had Parachute when I was earlier in my career. But I remember a time I didn't do it, and I probably should have. You can fire people in North America. I think that's still the case. And what happens when a company gets into a cash crunch or crisis and they have to shed jobs, they can do it very quickly. And so I call it Black Monday. And I remember coming in as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed 28-year-old. The company itself went from about 60 people down to 29. And I was the only person left in the sales and marketing team left standing. And so all of my colleagues around me, including a couple seniors to me, were fired and left that day. So no handover, no instructions. And that was a time, I think, had I had the bravery and the wherewithal and perhaps the knowledge of this podcast to go, I'm just going to stop and think about what we've been doing, what's been working, what's been not working, and how might I do this role differently? I might have. But instead, I remember cobbling together all of the plans, all of the spreadsheets, and just executing on their plans. And it probably wasn't until later in my career, I thought that was a great opportunity. Like we were doing magazine ads and stuff that I think back of, like I was in doer mode because I was really young. There was this big shock. I probably didn't want to ruffle any feathers, but it was the perfect opportunity to ruffle feathers and just start fresh.
I don't think you're alone in that. And I think it doesn't even take one of those big shocks. And I keep going back to that idea of subordinate because I think it really showcases how wrong we have it and the structural model that we've used that just really isn't fit for purpose. Because I think about the number of times I've been in leadership positions, even at our last startup, and I was so looking to my team, who were everything from sort of first job up to pretty senior product and technology roles. And every single one of them had really unique insights that they were privy to that I wasn't. I wasn't able to ring customers all day, every day. I wasn't answering support tickets. I wasn't in the code. I wasn't running the design team. All of those things gave those people such different perspectives and such different data and evidence than I had. And so I was always looking to them, and I found it so frustrating that they didn't want to give me that they didn't realize that was their role. And in the end, we obviously turned it around and got to the point that everyone contributed, but that they came into that situation thinking their role was to listen to what I said and deliver on it, rather than listen to what I said and see that as an opportunity to shape something that was better through all those insights. And I reckon the sooner you do that and learn to do that, the more you flex that muscle, so that by the time you are in those decision maker roles, you're actually quite used to having an opinion, pulling it out, debating stuff, challenging ideas.
It sounds as though it mattered a lot to you, but why it should matter to them and why people should really care about this is, number one, moving from that implementer to influencer allows for career growth because you're often more visible when you're expressing your opinions. Studies have shown that there's increased satisfaction when you become an influencer and you're adding value. We all care about adding value in an organization. And it is a win-win. Like I heard it was a win for you when people started doing it. It's also a win for an organization when people at every level can influence. And I know that Google ran a study, the Google Project Oxygen study, and I think we've referenced it before, but they have these top 8 qualities of effective leaders, and strong decision-making is one of them, which we need all the data points, all the perspectives. And the other one that makes that top 8 qualities of effective leaders is influence skills. So these are the skills that we should be flexing from day one. And they show teams that really, I suppose, foster it, invite it, and use it, show higher productivity, higher satisfaction, and successful project outcomes and completion.
Absolutely. And I'm not the podcast number savant here, but when we spoke about the drama triangle, one of the sides of that is the victim mode, or the other one is the villain mode, which is either everything's outside of my control or it's this vague and undefined them's fault. And I think when you are not used to sharing your opinion and bringing that valuable insight at work, it's really easy to blame other people for making poor decisions, but they're relying on you for those decisions. Like, if you are not down in the detail of stuff and you don't hear that from the people who you work with, how do you know that and add that to your decision making? And I think sometimes we can be guilty of thinking that as the further up you go, the more oversight you have, but actually you're more and more removed from the day-to-day stuff. So it is so critical for high-performing organizations to really get that. And not all managers are good at asking for it. And this sort of ties to another key part of PowerSuit is often you're put into formal leadership positions, manager positions, without much training. So you go in and you pretend you know what you're doing, and part of that is to follow this very outdated military model of now I'm the one who has to tell everyone what to do. And it sort of creates this really terrible spiral where people aren't asking for that insight, it's not being given, and poor decisions are being made.
Well, we've got some small actions to share so people can start to practice that. But what I loved in the research of this, off the back of our discussion about this week's newsletter, there's some really key mental shifts required first to move from that implementer to influencer, going from how do I do this to why are we doing this? And that really powerful, what is it that we're even trying to do here? Why are we doing it this way? Why are we seeking to achieve this? What is success? That kind of thing. Going from following the process to how could I improve the process? And your favorite, Nat, what is the solution to what is the real problem here?
Yeah, and all those three, if we used to have this process we called the flow. This is the process we still effectively run at PowerSuit, really starting with what does success look like? What is the problem we're trying to solve? And then the end of that, the other end of the cycle is the retrospective, which we often talk about even within a week at work, is spending 5 minutes at the end of your week going, what went right? What went wrong? How can I improve next week? Those are just really fundamental across your career, but really great when you are talking in an organization about new initiatives, new ideas, new potential solutions, instead of just assuming that they're a done deal.
I wish I'd had. It's so much more expensive to just keep going rather than just going, can we just hit pause for a minute and get back on the same page? Or just, can I get a better idea of what's happening here so that I can add more value, I think, which takes us to a couple of actions. And one of them, as you alluded to, is to use your voice and to share your opinion. And curious if you want to share kind of some low-hanging fruit, I suppose, in this space.
So last week we had Rachel Fitzjohn, who's a people and culture expert, deliver a masterclass, a mini masterclass to our members. And one of the things she spoke about, and she was talking about conflict with people in more senior positions, but what she was mentioned as an example is this idea of you've raised your opinion in a meeting and it doesn't feel heard. It may not have landed, you may not have put it in the right way, and often our instinct is to go, ugh, no one's listening to me, and walk away. Or you might not raise it at all because you've got this limiting belief that no one's going to pay attention anyway. And her advice was to regroup, and this could be done in 30 seconds, 10 seconds, go back to the fundamentals. What is the insight that you have uniquely because of your role? What is the stuff that you're bringing to this? Not your opinion. It's not about your opinion versus my opinion, but what unique insight do you have? Is it some sort of data that you've received from talking to customers? Is it an insight from working on a project that went really awry because people didn't communicate very well? What is that thing? Reframe success. Again, start with, we are all working towards this goal, and according to what my experience is, and explain that experience, this is why I really push for this. And to really, again, focus on success and your mutual goal, and then reiterate using the evidence that is unique to you, why your opinion or your input really is quite valuable. And it's harder to do than it is to say, because it's so easy to take it personally when you don't feel heard or you don't feel like you're in a position that you can influence, but it's much more valuable. Pause, take a breath, and try again.
Yeah, and I love even the words, I've noticed that, because that speaks exactly to your unique experience and learning as it relates to your job and the insights that you uniquely have. So I've noticed that, and then you can share some of those insights in team meetings. And then I also love the idea of keeping a journal. Insights that you have, jot them down throughout the week, or if you notice something that's not working, like if only, or things like, this kind of isn't quite working, or this is something I've learned. Those are the things then you bring to the meeting and share.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got two examples in that. One, we used to ask our customer success team every week to share key themes. What were the biggest problems our customers talked about this week? What were the biggest things that they contacted us for? Shocking how little that's asked in organizations, and that information, that wild source of information, is kept within one team. And when you start asking for it, what you tend to find is then people start paying more attention to it. So that team started thinking about it more. The flip side of that, I think, and I used to laugh at this example, Airbnb. Remember when the CEO of Airbnb decided to go back to staying in, he gave up his house for a year or something? Everyone celebrated him because he was going back to customer research. I just saw that as such a failure of getting perspectives from your people. He had this entire team whose job it was to get that customer insight, respond to support tickets, understand the customer experience, design a customer experience. So he shouldn't have had to go and do that. He should have created an environment where those insights were actually being shared in the organization. So I just thought it was such a funny example of people who'd missed the point when they were all celebrating the fact that the CEO had to do the work, where actually that is where he should have really fostered an environment where all that incredibly valuable knowledge was shared.
Yeah. Speak up when you have the opportunity, but for those leaders or those that are running meetings, make sure you're fostering an environment for people to speak up and share their unique perspectives.
And sometimes it has to be really deliberate. Like I've realized very early on that it's very easy to be interpreted as already having the solution and everyone feels like they need to go. So it could even just be using the words, hey guys, we're in discovery mode at the moment, or we're designing the solution at the moment. So this whole workshop or meeting, I'd like to hear all your perspectives, and keep that separate from the decision's been made. Now we just actually have to go and do it. And just so that you're creating that distinction.
And then another really powerful one that I was thinking about was we all have opportunities to share suggestions to make processes or projects better, but there's not always an obvious time to do it. So I thought we should just have a quick conversation about how people might go about doing that, because it feels like a really easy way to be heard, and it's not necessarily in a meeting.
Yeah, and sometimes we want to jump 3 levels up and give information to people who are so far more senior. And actually, in my opinion, that's not the right approach. You've got so many tools with your peers and the people you directly report to, or one level in that same area. Because what often happens is by leaping 3 levels up, the person you're speaking to has no control, they have no oversight, and they are very busy and sort of going, who are you? Whereas actually, if you were to identify, and we talk about this a lot even with those weekly reviews, if you were to start a system with your manager or stakeholders in your project or in your team, end of each week, what went well, what could we improve? Just asking that and making a habit of that, you'd be amazed how much this stuff comes out. Like, what's one thing we improved? Well, this week I feel like we dropped the ball on this deadline, or we didn't convey this clearly enough. Wow, that's some incredible insight that you have now shared in a really pragmatic, really easy way without turning it into this big feedback session.
And on forum, because you might get buy-in to do that or people's time to do that, or you may not. But I think that's a great opportunity even to consider an email to this current stakeholders to do that. What went right, what we could look at doing differently. The one caveat, and just a tip politically for those that are first navigating going from implementer to influencer, is that when you're sharing things, don't undermine anyone else. So don't throw anyone under the bus. Don't undermine their ideas or what they're currently doing. And don't undermine the current process. Like, it's kind of irrelevant what's currently happening. You can just say, I've noticed this data point, this thing. I think maybe we should look at doing something slightly different or improving this area rather than undermining this process is broken, because you never know who came up with that current process. It could be your manager or your manager's manager. So politically, I think navigating right forum, right tone, positive suggestions, and it could be, email.
And I think to add to that, we spoke last week about self-leadership and leadership versus management, and this idea of reiterating what success looks like and thinking broadly outside your own success or your team's success. And I say that because it is so important when participating in influencing to not get caught up about my idea versus your idea versus my thing versus your thing. This is not about whose idea wins. This is about practicing looking across and going, for the overall outcome of this project, this team, this organization, this is a piece of information that I have that may help. Yeah. And that's all it is. Yeah. And if someone doesn't respond to that and it doesn't get included, fine. It's not about you. It's not personal. Yeah. And that is really hard to practice.
I think that's actually also, that's smart strategically, but also politically, in that sense of like knowing when to push and knowing when to, I've said my piece, I'm just going to wait now. I think that's really important. And because there will be so many things you may not know about that are happening externally to you. And quite often they are political. So that's a great one. And the last tip I have with identifying decision makers and offering suggestions is to test the ideas. It could be with trusted colleagues. It could be with friends. It could be with your personal board of directors, other power suitors. It's always a good idea to say, I'm thinking this. In terms of a suggestion or an idea to flow this back up through my organization. Can I just test it out with you?
Yeah. And the other one I found actually in terms of the method of this is turn a suggestion into a question. Often works really well, because we've all probably experienced new people arriving in a team or organization who are brimming with great ideas and everything you're currently doing needs to change. And it's so frustrating when someone does that. Whereas if they were to instead ask and say, hey, have we considered doing this? Has this been done before? Why did we choose to do it this way? Where did the information come from to make this decision? Yeah. That is, you're diffusing that political tension and you're not coming in being a know-it-all. You are just asking really smart questions that often do end up leading to better information coming out. Or, hey, is it okay if I look into this a little bit more? Because I feel like I've got some information or some insight that I could add. And it's taking it away from me versus you, or who's right and who's wrong, into we've got the shared goal. I've got something that I think I can contribute. Is it appropriate for me to do it now? And sometimes things are too far along and it's too hard to change. And that is the reality of life.
Yeah, I know. So to summarize a couple quick actions, we've got speak up, contribute to team meetings, contribute when you can, when given the opportunity, prep to do that, and then back your opinions and your perspectives. And then finally, make suggestions, identify those key decision makers. And again, speak up, ask questions. I have a quote.
She has a quote. Of course she has a quote.
Thank goodness it's a woman this week. My quotes are always men, because men have historically spoken a lot and said a lot of things.
That's true. Every time I look up quotes, it's full of me.
Oh my gosh.
It's because there's like, hundreds of years of me giving quotes.
Thank goodness. This is Indra Nooyi, who's incredible former CEO of Pepsi and fabulous, fabulous, fabulous leader. She has said, "You are not just here to fill a spot, but to add value and change the equation."
I really like that.
So do I, because I think that's why she nailed it, was she got into an organization and changed it from the bottom up. And that speaks volumes, that quote.
Yeah, I agree. And
Amazing.
it just repositions what our roles are. I love it.
Okay, great chatting, everyone. And I don't know what we're going to chat about next week, but tune in to find out and check out powersuit.com. Get in touch. Love to hear your feedback. Give us 5 stars.
Give us those 5 stars. Every time we ask for it, we get a little bump of 5 stars. So we should ask every time.
Thanks, friends, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye.